Here's how to record slow motion on your Sony camera, but there's more than one way to do it. So stay tuned till the end to see which method is actually best for you. Here we're using the Sony FX30, but the layouts and settings are very similar on most, if not all, Sony cameras released thus far. For our first method, we're gonna use the movie mode. Okay, so we're gonna go into menu. Right over here for the FX30 or FX3, we have this separate main menu where you can go ahead and change your frame rate. Right now I have it set to 24p, and you can change it right to 60 or 120 frames. I'm gonna set mine to 60 frames because that is the lowest amount of frames that we can get while shooting slow motion. But for those of you not using an FX30, you can get to that also by going to the shooting menu, image quality and recording, movie setting, record frame rate, and you can also set it there, 60 frames, just like that. Okay, and then you can also choose whatever record setting that you wish. In this case, I'll just keep it at the lowest, 45, and that'll be enough for what I'm shooting today. Of course, you can choose higher bitrate, but I'm gonna conserve on space. Okay, so right off the bat, because we're shooting 60 FPS, we wanna follow that rule of thumb and shoot at 1/125th of a second for our shutter speed and our aperture as low as it can be, and then adjust your ISO accordingly. But I'm going to keep it as these settings, 1/125, f4.0 because of the lens that I have, and our ISO 2500. And this is how it looks like when we record the footage. Okay, now that we're done recording, we'll import into our computer. In order to slow it down, we gotta drop this footage into our editing software, which in this case is Final Cut Pro. We'll open a new project and choose the correct frame rate, which is 23.98. After I drop in our 60 FPS clip from earlier, I can select it, go over here, and change our playback speed from 100% to 40%, and now it should look like this. Simple enough, right? But the next method is even easier and doesn't even require a computer. We're gonna use S&Q mode, or slow and quick mode. We're gonna flip the camera dial to S&Q if you have it, or in this case, for the FX30, we go into our mode menu for this. We can find that when going to the mode menu, or the mode dial, and just switch it over to S&Q. Okay, now that we switch to S&Q mode, you can already see that at the corner of the screen it says X2.5 slow, which means 2.5 times slow. Let's just make sure our settings are dialed in correctly, so we're gonna go back into our main menu, and it's just as I wanted it to be. In the FX30, go over here, and we chose our frame rate of 60 FPS, while our main recording frame rate is 24. If you want it to be 2.5 times slower, then you would go ahead over here to 60 FPS and change it to 120 FPS. And now you can see below that number is 5 times slow. But for example, we'll stick to 60 FPS. But if you're not using an FX3 or an FX30, you can go back to the shooting menu, image quality and recording, and then S&Q settings. And just what we said from before, I'm gonna keep it at 24 frames per second, and S&Q frame rate at 60 frames per second. And then you can choose again how much data you're gonna record of this. And for me, again, 30 megabytes per second is perfect for me. Okay, now just hit record. This is how it looks like when you play back. Do note that when you use this mode, there is no sound. So if you think you might want to use any audio from your video, just use the first method instead of this one. If 60 frames per second is still not slow enough for you, well then choose your S&Q frame rate to 120 frames per second or more if your camera supports it. In this case, it's 240 in 1080p for this camera. See, slow motion is easy. Just don't overdo it in your videos because it may just get boring. But in the meantime, click over here to see how much slow motion you can actually get out of your camera and what it actually looks like, especially at this FX30. Thanks again for watching. Now go out there and shoot for the life that matters. See ya.